The third time the wolf turned up at my door, I had wax to the elbows and a candle half dipped, and I still found a moment to tell him, very clearly, that this was becoming a habit. He looked at me the way he always did. Like I was the one being unreasonable. He was enormous. I want that understood, because people hear the word wolf and picture something a determined goose could see off. This was not that. This was a creature the size of a plough horse, black going to silver at the muzzle, sitting on my threshold with his tail curled neat around his paws, and the particular patient expression of a guest who has decided he lives here now. No, I told him. He thumped his tail once. I should explain that I am a chandler, that my name is Maren, and that at 26 I had been running my father's shop alone for 4 years, and had developed a low tolerance for things that arrived at my door uninvited. Tax collectors, suitors who had heard a woman ran the place, the weather. I was not in the habit of being charmed. I was, apparently, in the habit of being ignored. He padded past my knees into the cottage, turned twice in front of the hearth as if testing it for honesty, and lay down with a sigh that fogged the flagstones. The fire caught the silver in his coat and made him look, briefly, less like an animal and more like a decision someone had carved out of the dark. That is my hearth. He closed his eyes. So that was Tuesday. I had found him the first time 8 days before, scratching at my door in the blue hour before dawn, and I had done the sensible thing, which was to assume he belonged to someone. Nothing that well-fed and that unafraid of a human woman with a broom belongs to no one. I had walked him up the forest road to the palace gates, because the palace was the only place for miles that kept beasts of that size, and I had handed him over to the guards with the firm suggestion that they mend their fences. The guards had looked at me strangely. I had put it down to the broom. The second time, 4 days later, I had walked him back again, and the guard at the gate, a young one, all jaw and no sense, had gone the colour of cheese and dropped to one knee in the mud. I had assumed he was unwell. I had told him to sit with his head down and drink something warm, and I had left the wolf with a different guard, an older one whose hands were not steady. I keep a candle in my window every night. A tall one, honey-coloured, the good beeswax, not the cheap tallow I sell to the village. I light it at dusk and let it burn down to nothing, every night, in all weathers, and I have done it since I was 12 years old. My father was a road warden. He kept the forest paths after dark so that no traveller would be lost in them. He was lost in them himself one winter, 3 fields from a lit window he could not see through the snow. And after that I decided that anyone passing my door in the dark would have something to steer by, whether they needed it or not. It is a foolish habit. I am aware, I have been told. I tell you this because I have since wondered whether that was what he saw. The first time. A lit window on a black road. Whether a creature like that can want a thing without knowing the shape of the wanting. But I am getting ahead of myself, and on that third Tuesday I knew none of it. I knew only that there was a wolf the size of a sin asleep on my floor, and that the bread was burning, and that I would have to walk him back to the palace again in the morning and endure the guards and their strange, stricken faces. I did not sleep much. He did. He snored like a man who had earned it. In the morning I clipped a length of soft rope to nothing in particular. He wore no collar. He would suffer no collar. I had tried, and I walked beside him up the road, and the whole way he kept pace with me exactly, neither ahead nor behind, his shoulder a hand's width from my hip, matching his stride to mine like it was a thing he had practiced. At the gate, the older guard saw us coming and made a sound I can only describe as the sound a man makes when his worst suspicion is confirmed in front of witnesses. "Mistress," he said. "You should not, that is." He stopped. He looked at the wolf. The wolf looked back at him with what I would later understand was open warning and at the time read as boredom. "You should not handle him. He handles fine," I said. "He sleeps through anything. He has eaten half a wheel of my cheese. I would like my cheese reimbursed, and I would like your fences mended, and I would like to go home. Behind the guard, in the courtyard, a man in a grey robe had gone very still. He was tall and thin and tidy in the way that careful men are tidy, every fold of him deliberate, and he was watching me with an attention that did not match the situation. A lost wolf returned by a candlemaker is a small thing. He looked at it like a sum he was adding. I noticed, the way you notice a draft, without yet knowing where it comes in. "Leave him," the man said to the guards, not to me. His voice was mild, and it carried. "The king's own beast is not your concern. See, the woman paid for her cheese and sent home. The king's own beast." I am not slow. I want that on the record. But I had spent 8 days thinking of him as a stray with delusions, and the mind does not turn that fast, and so what I felt first was not understanding, but a small cold drop of it, like the first of the rain. I looked at the wolf. The wolf looked at me, and for the length of one breath, he did not look like an animal at all. Then a coin purse was put into my hand, and I was walking back down the road alone, and behind me I heard the gate close, and I told myself the whole way home that grey-robed men say foolish things, and that beasts are beasts, and that I had a shop to run. The candle burned in my window that night, the same as always. He came back before it had finished. I did not let him in. I want credit for that. I stood in my own doorway with my arms crossed, and I said, "Absolutely not. You belong to the king. Go and belong to him." He sat down in the wet and looked at me and did not go and belong to anyone. There is a thing that happens when you understand something with your body before your mind has agreed to it. I understood, standing there in the cold with a creature the size of a myth at my feet, that this was not a lost animal. He knew exactly where he was. He had chosen it. Something in the careful set of him, the way he had matched my stride, the way he slept like he trusted the room, was a choice. And choices belong to minds, and I did not want to think too hard about what kind of mind was sitting in my mud, refusing to be sent home. So I did not think about it. I let him in. I am not made of stone. And it was raining. He lay by the fire. I worked. And somewhere in the small hours, with my hands busy and the dark making me braver than daylight ever did, I started talking to him the way you talk to a dog or a grave or a god, not expecting an answer, just to put the words somewhere. I told him about my father, about the candle, about being 12 and watching the search parties come back empty and deciding, with the terrible certainty of a child, that the dark would never take anyone from me again if I could help it, and that I knew it was foolish, that a window cannot save a man 3 fields away in a blizzard, that I lit it anyway, every night, because the alternative was to let the dark win 1 more inch of ground. I had never said any of that aloud. Not to the priest, not to the women in the village who clucked over me, not to the one man who had courted me long enough to call my candle a waste of good wax before I sent him on his way. The wolf had lifted his head while I spoke. He watched me with an attention that I would, much later, recognize as the most complete attention anyone had ever paid me. At the time I only thought, he is a good listener, for a thief. Don't tell anyone, I said, and laughed at myself and went to bed. In the morning he was gone, and on my doorstep, laid out with the obscene neatness of an offering, was a rabbit, a courting gift. I did not know that then. I thought it was a wolf doing wolf things, and I made a stew. After that I stopped pretending. He came most nights. Not every night, there were stretches of 3 or 4 days when he did not, and I told myself I was glad of the quiet, and lit my candle, and watched the road. He always came back, and he always brought something. The rabbit was the first. Then a comb, silver, finely worked, the kind of thing that has a history. Then, and I had no idea what to do with this, a fur, thick and dark and clearly costly, dragged the whole way up the road and deposited on my step with twigs in it, and an expression of enormous pride. I shook the twigs out and used it as a blanket and tried not to wonder whose it had been. The village began to talk. A woman alone with a great black wolf coming and going is not a thing that escapes notice, and the talk was the usual mixture of witch and worse, and I bore it the way I bore the weather, because the alternative was to care what people who had never lit a candle for me thought. It was the grey-robed man I should have worried about. He came to my shop himself on a grey afternoon on the pretext of buying candles. Chancellor Aldous, he named himself, and he bought a great many candles he plainly did not need, and he asked me a great many questions he plainly already knew the answers to. How often the beast came. Which nights. How long he stayed. He asked it all gently, the way a physician asks where it hurts, and he wrote nothing down, and I understood, watching him, that he did not need to. He was a man who kept his ledgers in his head. "You are fond of him," he said at the door, smiling. "He is fond of my cheese." Said Chancellor Aldous, and looked at me a moment longer than the words required, and went. I did not like him. I want that noted, because so much of what came after, everyone else found surprising. And I did not. I had felt the draft. I simply had not found the gap it came through. The gap, as it happened, came through Lady Ingrid. She arrived a week later, not at my shop, but at my door, in a fine grey travelling cloak with 3 armed riders behind her, and she did not dismount. She looked down at me from her horse the way you look at something on the bottom of your shoe, and she informed me, in a voice pitched for the riders to hear, that I was harbouring stolen royal property and bewitching the king's beast away from its rightful place, and that this would be answered for. "He lets himself in," I said. "Take it up with him." She did not care for that. I have, I am told, a way of saying true things that lands like an insult, and I have never learnt to suppress it, and it has cost me. It cost me then. She wheeled her horse and told me I would be summoned before the court, and that I should think very carefully, in the meantime, about what a human woman's word was worth against a lady of the blood. "Not much," was the honest answer. I did not give it. I know how this sounds. A woman alone in the woods, a great black wolf, a candle in the window. I have heard the village version, and the village version has a cauldron in it. If you are out there in the dark, with your own light burning, I would dearly love to know where you are, and what you keep lit, and for whom. Tell me after, in the comments. And if you have not yet, follow along, because I promise you the truth of this is stranger than anything the village ever came up with. I want to tell you that I was afraid, and I was, but underneath the fear was a colder thing, which was certainty. Because that morning, on my step, the wolf had left me something new, and I had been carrying it in my apron pocket all day, not knowing what to do with it, and now I took it out and looked at it in the failing light. A ring. A heavy iron signet, worn smooth, stamped with a wolf's head crowned. The king's seal. He had brought me the king's own seal, the way he had brought me a rabbit, with the same pride, and I stood in my doorway holding the most dangerous object I had ever touched, and I understood at last, completely, the way you understand the floor is gone only after you have started to fall. There was no stolen royal property. There was no bewitched beast. There was only him. If you have ever sat very still, while everything you understood rearranged itself, you will know that there is no dramatic moment to it. The world does not change. The candle burns. The wax cools on your hands. You simply know a thing you cannot unknow, and you set the ring on the table, and you sit down across from it, and you wait for the dark to bring back the wolf, who was never a wolf, so that you can look him in the eye. He came at midnight. I had left the door open. He came in his fur, the way he always did, and he stopped just inside the threshold, because the door being open and me sitting at the table with his seal between us was not the usual arrangement, and even an animal knows when the air in a room has changed. "I know," I said. He stood very still. "I don't know your name," I said. "I have told you about my father. I have told you about the candle. I told you things I have never told a living soul. because I thought you were a dumb beast who could not carry them anywhere. And the whole time, my voice did the thing I had not given it permission to do. I made it stop. The whole time you were a man who could. He shifted. I had never seen it before, and I hope I never see anything like it again. Not because it was monstrous, but because it was so quiet, a folding, a gathering, the dark drawing itself up off the floor. And then there was a man kneeling on my flagstones where the wolf had been, head bowed, the firelight finding the silver at his temples that I had taken for the silver in a coat. He did not rise. He stayed on his knees, which I would later learn the king of the Iron Territories did not do, had not done, would not have done for any creature in the living world. Soren, he said, his voice was rough from disuse, or from something. My name is Soren. I had a great many things to say. I am told I always do. I found I could not say any of them. He did not stay long that night. There is only so much that can be borne in one sitting, and we had both reached the edge of it. He told me, kneeling, in short, hard sentences like a man paying out coin he could not spare, that his wolf had known me from the first night, that the wolf had simply gone, again and again, to the lit window on the black road, and that he had let it, against every rule he had ever made for himself, because it was the only place the noise in him went quiet. I should have told you, he said. Every night, I should have told you. I let you talk to a beast because I was a coward in a man's shape, and a beast in the only shape that was honest. I am sorry. You ate my cheese, I said, which was not what I meant, and he understood that it was not what I meant, and something in his face that had been braced for a blow let go. Then he told me the part that mattered, that a human could not be a king's mate, not by any law the pack knew, that his court would not have it, that his chancellor, and here his jaw did a thing I filed away, had been counting his absences for weeks, building something out of them. That by coming to my door he had handed his enemies a knife, and that the kindest thing he could do now was to never come again. So don't, he looked at me. If it is so dangerous, I said, don't come. Go and be a king. I will light my candle, and you will see it from your tower, or you won't, and we will both go on. That is the sensible thing. I heard my own voice come out steady, and hated it for lying. Is that what you came to say? He was quiet a long moment. No, he said. I came because you knew, and I could not let you sit alone with knowing. And then he left before either of us could make it worse, and I sat with the ring and the dark and the candle, and I did not feel sensible at all. The summons came 2 days later. The Great Hall of the Iron Territories is built to make you feel small, and it succeeds. I had never been inside it. I walked the length of it under the eyes of the entire court, wolves in human shape. Every one of them, and every one of them aware to the bone of what I was not, and at the far end, on a throne of black wood carved into a snarl, sat Soren. He did not look at me. I understood why. I did not hold it against him. It still took something out of me. Lady Ingrid spoke first. She had dressed for it. She laid out the charge with relish. The human woman who had lured the king's beast from its place, who had been found in possession of the royal seal, who had bewitched a creature of the blood and shamed the crown before the pack. She had witnesses. She had the guards who had seen me at the gate. She had, produced with a flourish, the signet ring, which I had surrendered at the door because a human does not walk armed with a king's seal into a hall full of wolves and live. It was a good performance. The court ate it. And then Chancellor Aldous rose, and I learnt the difference between a performance and a blade. He did not accuse me of anything. That was the genius of it. He thanked Lady Ingrid for her vigilance, and he said, in his mild carrying voice, that he feared the woman was a symptom and not the sickness. That the king had been leaving his own hall, night after night, in his wolf's shape. For weeks he had a tally, he produced it, a long sheet covered in dates in his own neat hand, and that a king whose beast wandered from him. who could not master his own shifting, who knelt, it was whispered, who knelt, was a king the council had a duty to consider carefully. For the good of the realm, with all love, he moved that the king be placed under the council's guidance until the matter of his beast was resolved, and that the beast itself, which had proven it could not be governed, be put down before it shamed the crown further, or did worse. The hall went very quiet. I watched it happen, watched the older wolves lean toward it, watched the arithmetic of it move through the room, watched a vote begin to form out of fear the way frost forms out of cold. It was going to carry. I could see it going to carry. Soren stood. He came down off the black throne, which I do not think anyone in that hall had seen him do, and he crossed the floor to where I stood with the guard's hands not quite on me, and he turned to face his court. And he put himself between me and all of it. The beast was not lured, he said. It was not stolen. It was not bewitched. He let it land. It went where I sent it, because I am the beast. And I sent myself, and I will not stand in my own hall and let a woman be hanged for a road I walked myself. You could have heard a candle gutter. The seal was not taken, he said. I gave it as a man gives a thing to the person he means to give everything. He looked at me then, finally, and the whole court saw him do it, and there was nothing in his face he was trying to hide, which for a man like him was the most reckless thing he could possibly have done. I have made one law my whole reign, he said. Want nothing they can take from you. I have broken it for her. Let that be on the record. Let it be on the tally. He turned to Aldous. Count that, he said. It should have ended there. In the story I would have written, it ended there. The king declares himself, the court is shamed, the lady is undone, the human girl is lifted up. I have learnt since that the stories we want and the dangers we are in are rarely the same shape. Because Aldous did not look defeated. He looked, for one unguarded instant, satisfied, and I, who keep ledgers, who have read men by their accounts my whole working life, saw it and understood that we had just given him exactly what he wanted. A king who had confessed, before the whole council, that his beast was beyond his governing, that he knelt, that he had broken his own law. A king who could now, with regret, with all love, be removed. Then it is worse than I feared, Aldous said softly, and folded his hands, and the trap I had felt as a draught all those weeks closed without a sound. They did not move against him in the hall. That is not how careful men work. They adjourned, and they posted guards, and word went out that night. I had it from Gunnar, the king's second. A slab of a man with kind eyes who found me in the corridor where they had put me and spoke fast and low, that Aldous had sanctioned a hunt. A rogue wolf, the order said, a danger to the territories, to be put down before dawn. Everyone knew which wolf. No one would say it. If the king's own beast died on a hunt, as a beast, then the king had died lost to his madness. And the council would hold the realm in trust, and Aldous would hold the council. He has the dogs out on the forest road, Gunnar said. They will drive him toward the open ground by the river. They will take him there. The forest road. My road. He will go to the candle, I said. I knew it the way I knew my own name. Driven, hunted, afraid, the wolf in him would do the one thing it had always done. It would run for the lit window. Straight into open ground. Straight onto Aldous's arrows. I have been asked, since, what I was thinking, running out into a black wood full of armed hunters in nothing but my work dress with a candle in a horn lantern. The honest answer is that I was not thinking. There are things below thinking. My father walked into the dark for strangers his whole life. I had lit a window for them for 14 years. I was not going to stand in a stone corridor and let the dark take the one who had finally come. Gunnar came with me. I want that remembered. I did not do it alone, and a king's second risked his own neck on the word of a chandler, and there are more good men in this than the stories usually allow. We reached the open ground by the river as the dogs broke from the trees, and there he was, running, black against the snow, magnificent and terrified, running for the light I held up in my 2 hands, like the foolish, stubborn thing it had always been. And on the rise above the river, Aldous' archers. I did the only thing there was to do. I ran out between the wolf and the rise, into the open, holding the light high so the wolf would come to me and not to the river, and I heard Gunnar shout. And I heard a bowstring, and I felt the candle flame snap sideways in the wind of something passing close, and then a line of cold opened along my arm. Bright and clean. And the lantern fell, and I went down into the snow with my own blood black in the strange light. I remember thinking, very clearly, not the candle. Don't let it go out. It did not go out. I had cupped it falling, the way you cup a thing you have spent your life keeping lit, and it burned there in the snow beside my opened arm, small and gold and absurd. And the wolf reached me before the archers could draw again, and stood over me and over the light and put himself between me and the rise and would not move. There is a sound a hunting party makes when it realizes what it is about to do in front of witnesses. Gunnar was roaring the king's name. Riders were coming from the keep. Soren had broken his guard, I learned later. The moment he understood where the hunt was driving him. And in the middle of it, all I lay in the snow, with my hand around a candle, and a wolf's heart beating over me like a drum, and I started, helplessly, to laugh. "You menace," I said. "You absolute menace. I told you this was becoming a habit." They took Aldous on the riverbank, his own archers turning their bows over the moment the king stood among them, in the shape of a man with a human woman's blood on his hands and murder plain on his face. It is a hard thing to follow a chancellor into killing your king by accident. It is harder still once the king is standing in front of you, alive, asking your name. It was the tally that finished Aldous. Not the hunt. A careful man can talk his way out of a hunt, call it a tragedy, a confusion in the dark. It was the sheet of dates, the one he had been so proud of, the one he had waved before the council as proof of the king's decline. I asked Gunnar to bring it to me while my arm was being stitched, and I read it the way I read any ledger, and I found what careful men always leave, which is a record. The earliest date on Aldous' tally was 3 weeks before the night the signet was reported stolen. 3 weeks before he claimed to have first learned the king's beast was wandering. He had known where Soren went, and to whom, for 3 weeks, and said nothing, had let it build, had fed it, had set a watcher on the forest road, had counted and waited and let the danger ripen, all so that he could harvest it in open council. A man does not accidentally keep a record that careful. A man keeps it because he is building a case, and a case built 3 weeks before the crime it claims to have discovered is not vigilance. It is a plan. I read that out, my arm bound and my dress ruined, and my voice not entirely steady. To the council that had nearly voted to take a man's crown for the sin of going where he was wanted. They are not stupid, the wolves of the Iron Territories. They simply frighten easily, like anyone, and Aldous had known how to feed the fright. Shown the date, shown the lie under it, they turned on him the way a pack turns, all at once and without mercy. And he was stripped of his chain and his lands and put out past the borders before the next dusk, which for a man who lived by being indispensable is a death longer than the other kind. Lady Ingrid, to her credit, was horrified. She had wanted a crown and a king, she had not wanted a murder, and when she understood what she had been the bright loud front for, she went white and quiet and asked, of all people, my forgiveness. I told her I had no use for it, but she could pay for my cheese, which made Gunnar laugh so hard he had to leave the room. That was the subversion, if you want to call it that, the thing none of us saw, though all of us should have. We had all been watching the lady on the horse. The blade was in the hand of the man buying candles he did not need, asking gentle questions, counting in his head. I had felt the draft from the first afternoon. I simply had not believed that the cold could come from the most reasonable man in the room. I have since stopped trusting reasonable men on principle. Soren says this is unfair. I tell him he is not reasonable, he is merely correct, and these are different things, and he lets me win it because he is learning. The kiss, when it came later, and I will not give you the meat of it, because some things are mine. I will tell you only that it was in the doorway of my own cottage, with the candle lit behind me, and the dawn coming grey up the forest road. And that when it was over I understood for the first time in my life what my father had been keeping the dark out of, all those years, with nothing but a lantern and a stubborn refusal to let anyone be lost. I will tell you that he said my name like it was the law he had been looking for his whole reign. I will tell you that I let him in, and this time I meant it, and I did not make him sleep by the hearth. 6 months on, there is a candle in the high window of the keep. He had it put there the week I came to live in the palace, in the tower that catches the last of the light, and it burns every night now in all weathers, tended by a boy whose only task it is, so that anyone on the black road below, traveller, stray, lost thing, lost man, has something to steer by whether they need it or not. The court found it strange. The court finds most of what we do strange. The court is adjusting. I am the Luna of the Iron Territories, which still makes me want to laugh in the wrong places, a human candle maker at the head of a table of wolves, settling their disputes with the cold good sense of a woman who has never once been impressed by a title. They came to it slowly. Some came to it because they feared him. More came to it, in the end, because of the candle in the window, which it turns out a great many of them had reasons to be grateful for and had simply never said. Gunnar is the Chancellor now. He is a terrible Chancellor and an excellent man, and I would not trade him for 10 clever ones. A letter came last week from the village, from the man who once called my candle a waste of good wax. He wished me joy of my marriage, and asked, with great delicacy, whether the new Luna might see her way to a royal contract for the supply of the keep's candles, his workshop being so very near, his quality being so very fine. I had Gunnar write back that the keep makes its own. Soren still goes to the wolf more than a king is meant to. I find him some nights gone from our rooms, and I know where to look, down by the gate, in the snow, black against the white, sitting with his tail curled neat around his paws, and the particular patient expression of a creature waiting for someone to come and tell him he is being unreasonable. I always do. He always thumps his tail. It is, I have decided, a very foolish habit. I have no intention whatsoever of breaking it. So tell me, did you see the Chancellor coming, or were you watching the lady on the horse like the rest of us? And wherever you are tonight, whatever you are keeping lit, and for whom, I hope it brings someone home. Light a candle in the comments and let me know where you are listening from. If this kept you company in the dark, stay a while, follow along, and I will leave the window burning. There is always room by the fire, and I have, against all my better judgment, learned to leave the door open.